Okay, it's going to be a review of WWE Unforgiven 2002. This took place September 22nd, 2002 from the Staples Center, what they call now Crypto.com Arena from Los Angeles, California. 16,000 in attendance. Yeah, really good turnout. You know, felt like it was sold out. Shaq was actually in the audience with his son at the show. It was actually Sharif. He looked like looked like he was like 2 or 3 years old at the time. He's actually in the G League right now. So Shaq was actually at this show. Kurt Angle was actually looking at him, during the Benoit match because, a lot of the crowd was fixated on Shaq coming back from the bathroom. So I thought that was pretty funny. But the buy rate was actually 300,000. That's the lowest buy rate of 2002. I don't know how much the NFL really plays into it. I'm going to assume it had a little bit to do with it, but the bottom line is I think this is definitely a filler pay-per-view. I think a lot of people just saw that, the pay-per-view after SummerSlam, especially with the title situation, there's no way that Triple H is going to lose his first title defense. Then at the same time, I think DQ disqualification was written all over the main event, even though I think this is a really good show. I think it's a top 5 show of 2002. It's got one of the best Angle vs. Benoit matches, and I think it's a solid follow-up to SummerSlam, without a doubt. So let's get right into it. First match of the night. We got Booker T, Bubba Ray Dudley, Goldust, and Kane taking on the Un-Americans of Christian, Lance Storm, Test, and we're inserting William Regal with the Un-American T-shirt into the equation here. Yeah, so Regal joining the Un-Americans was definitely I thought it was good. When I look at the Un-American stable, I said they're all really good workers. They're all like really good natural heels. And I look at all that talent in the Un-American stable. I'm just like, man, if one of those guys could have just been a babyface to take on Triple H, that really would have solved the problem of rushing, RVD and Triple H this soon. But I don't know. I don't know. So if I were to ask anyone watching this video, which one of the Un-Americans really could have been taken as a legit babyface, I hate to say it, but maybe at the time it could have been Test. But yeah, I thought the Un-American stable was really, really cool. I just wish they had given them a different title, maybe some sort of an international title, because I definitely think you had all the elements there. What the Un-Americans really did well was they really got the baby faces over. I mean, the crowd was hot for this match. They were emotionally engaged. Everybody was pretty over here on the babyface team. Booker T was great. Bubba Ray was telling Booker to get the tables. That was definitely a highlight of the match. Even Goldust played his role really well. And this was really just about, getting Kane that big monster victory so he can move on to face Triple H. And then you get the whole Katie Vick thing going. So yeah, this is a great return match for Kane. It was really just a lot of fun. I would actually say this would have been like a really solid, fun, Raw main event, and you got it here to open up the show. So the pay-per-view definitely got off to a good start. I thought the crowd was definitely hot for the opener and really hot for the main event, to be honest with you. One of the things about, and let me say this now, and that's kind of one of the things that I think has always went under the radar. I touched on this at Vengeance 2001 in San Diego. I think, a lot of times when you do these West Coast shows, like you almost forget that this is happening really early. This is a 5 p.m. Bell time. So, and a lot of fans, like especially at Laker games, they have a reputation for like not showing up to halftime. The celebrities, Jack Nicholson, the game doesn't really start until halftime. So I think this show definitely had that feel. It really felt like the crowd was at its best, the later the show went on in some ways. All right, so next up we got Chris Jericho defending the Intercontinental Championship against Ric Flair. This was cool. The match wasn't as good as the SummerSlam match. SummerSlam match was really good compared to this. This was kept very short. This is just about telling the story of Flair joining Evolution. But if some of you guys may forget or don't remember, Jericho wins the Intercontinental Championship from Rob Van Dam on Raw. So Triple H is sort of like mocking RVD, basically screws RVD out of the IC title, and Jericho actually makes Van Dam tap while Triple H is mocking him. So that's how it happens right there. And so they end up having a rematch from SummerSlam with Flair at Unforgiven. Yeah, the match is going along great. I really thought Jericho and Flair, had they met in their prime, they could have had some really, really good chemistry together here. This was cool. You know, Flair was actually going over the work on Jericho's knee before the spot, but then Jericho goes for the lion salt. And at the time, I remember buying the injury because, you know, after seeing what Triple H went through, my mentality is you just never know. So Jericho goes for the lion salt, and he's actually telling the referee that he felt something pop. And then Flair's trying to get the figure four back onto him, and he's just like, no, stop, I heard something pop. And then all of a sudden, Charles Robinson, the referee, he's yelling for the trainer to come out. The trainer does come out. Flair, for whatever reason, he's just like frustrated, and he just turns his back. And all of a sudden, Jericho just stands up and puts him in the walls of Jericho, and he taps out like right away. And then Jim Ross, you know, JR was a huge Flair fan. He called so many of Flair's matches back in the NWA. He just goes like, "Oh my God, I can't believe it. Flair just fell for the oldest trick in the book." But it was cool. It really kind of played into the promo later on in the show. And yeah, you know, I'll get to let me try to remember to talk about that backstage segment, which was really good. All right, next up we got Eddie Guerrero taking on Edge, a rematch from SummerSlam. This was an incredible week for Eddie. Incredible week I mean, if you want to talk about injuries, this is really where Edge's neck injury started to really bother him. So, but in terms of Eddie Guerrero's popularity, you really haven't seen like a lot of Eddie support until this weekend. You know, they're on the West Coast here, Los Angeles, and then on SmackDown, they had that classic in San Diego. I'm actually going to review that SmackDown for, the last day of September. I'll probably come out with that. But, you know, it's arguably the best SmackDown ever, so it definitely deserves a review. I know it's well-documented stuff from the SmackDown Super 6, but yeah. This was one of my favorite weeks in WWE history, and probably favorite months ever, September 2002. But I'll get more into it as the week goes on. But yeah, Eddie Guerrero taking on Edge here, the rematch from SummerSlam. I thought this was actually a step up from the SummerSlam match. You know, Edge talked about how he felt like, you know, they didn't have the best of chemistry at first, but, you know, he felt like they finally clicked at the Unforgiven match. Edge is actually selling a concussion here. So, you know, whenever Edge executed a big spot, Michael Cole and Taz would just be like, oh, Edge probably has nothing left in the tank after that. He sucked it up and gave all his energy for that spot. I mean, they really did click a little bit better here. There was some really, really nicely executed stuff. Eddie was going for the old school version of the Hurricanrana, where he's walking the top rope, and then Edge counters that into a power bomb. So that was pretty cool. There was, you know, Eddie did some really nice counters trying to stay away from the spear. You saw a little bit of comedy too with Eddie, you know, telling the referee that he's sorry. Then he tells him to kiss his ass, and then Edge schoolboys him out of there. So you did have a little bit of elements of comedy, and you almost forget that the turnbuckle was actually loosened by Eddie. I don't even remember him loosening it up, but there was an Irish whip that, God, who is it? Was Edge took into the turnbuckle, and then the turnbuckle just comes off, and then Eddie and Edge are on the top rope. Then all of a sudden, Eddie counters it and just takes Edge's head and just clocks it up against the exposed turnbuckle, and then he nails him with the sunset flip. Eddie Guerrero is probably the best at executing a sunset flip. I mean, this sunset flip looked nasty. It felt like a car wreck. I mean, and the scary thing about it is it's not even the worst sunset flip that Edge took that week. You know, 48 hours later, he ended up taking it off of a ladder. And, you know, maybe that's what did him in. But, yeah, it's an amazing finish. The fans are really getting behind Eddie here. You know, they're on the West Coast. You know, there's a huge Latina demographic over there. So it definitely makes sense. So, yeah, really good coming out party for Eddie Guerrero. I felt like this is this was the week where you really saw that, you know, Eddie could possibly be a babyface, and I think eventually the Guerreros were a babyface tag team once 2003 came along. So the seeds were definitely planted in that match. All right, next up we got 3-minute warning of Jamal and Rosey with Rico. Rico actually coming back and going up against his former tag team of Billy and Chuck. All right, so this was really cool. This was really about Stephanie and Bischoff. And by the way, I was a little bit harsh on Steph and Bischoff last couple of pay-per-views with the awkward writing and the awkward segments. But I felt like on this pay-per-view and leading up to the show as well, I thought they were both great. I think this was really Steph's crowning achievement as a babyface. Her performance on this show and Bischoff during the build-up here was great. I mean, there's kind of like this misconception that, Vince brought in Bischoff just to humiliate him. And I think maybe some of that's true. I mean, when you look at all the moments where Bischoff got humiliated and, the Mae Young thing is one that comes to mind. Cena F5ing him FUing him into the dump truck is another one. But the bottom line is, I think the main reason why Vince brought in Bischoff is because he's just, he's a great performer. He really is. I mean, and he proved it. This segment with Billy and Chuck, where he's playing at the Billy and Chuck wedding, where he's playing the priest, and then he's going into this tirade where he mentions something about 3 minutes, and then he's like, "Wait a minute, did I hear myself say 3 minutes?" And then he takes the mask off. You can see that as Bischoff. It's one of the best moments of the year, like one of the best non-wrestling moments of the year. So. Just wanted to make that point. The match is pretty much generic stuff, but I did want to mention. All right, so Jamal and Rosey, one of these guys is actually Umaga. I can't remember which one. I guess it was Jamal. And the other one, I think it's Rosey. It looks just like Roman Reigns. He's got to be related to Roman. It looks like a fat version of Roman Reigns. It's crazy. I never really realized that until watching it back. But yeah, I mean, 3-minute warning, big Samoan dudes. I thought they looked good here. The funny thing about Billy Gunn is you could just tell this match had, severe time constraints. It was, you could just tell it was very well put together by the agent. So there's just no time to do like whatever you wanted. So it's funny because the last time I saw Billy Gunn wrestle, during the Unbreakable pay-per-view, he was teaming up with Monty Brown, and you could just tell like he was just doing whatever the fuck he wanted. But it's a totally different situation here. So yeah, I thought Billy and Chuck worked good within the parameters of the time constraints, and the ending looked really good too. Ending came off great. Umaga, I just think you could definitely see his talent there. I thought both teams actually looked solid for the amount of time that it went. I mean, it's tough to give this a good rating because it is what it is. All right, so let's move along to the Triple H and Rob Van Dam promo. So Triple H comes into the locker room. Van Dam is stretching, and Flair is kind of just like sitting, looking depressed. And so Triple H comes up to RVD. He's like, Rob, you're so calm, cool, collected. You know what that tells me? It tells me you've got no passion, and there's no way you're taking my title tonight. He's like, you see that guy right there? You see that guy, Ric Flair? He won the World Heavyweight Championship. There was a time when he had that passion and he had that desire, but not anymore. I mean, look at him now. And it's only right, Zen Master, that you're getting ready for your match with the loser like Flair. And then Flair all of a sudden gets up, and then Van Dam's like, whoa. Just so you know, I'd rather be associated with a so-called loser like Flair than an alleged winner like you any day. And as Van Dam's telling this to Triple H, you can see Flair's demeanor kind of change. And it kind of goes in line with what he was talking about the next night on Raw, where he said, I'm going to end my career where I started it, on top, because he wanted to be associated with Triple H and everything. So, and that's exactly how it played out. So Flair actually does screw Van Dam and sides with Triple H. And this is where, the early stages of evolution are, fully get into gear. But, after that promo, I did want to talk about the video package here and the build-up between Triple H and RVD. I mean, I could write a whole book about this, and, maybe I should have taken notes because there's a lot I want to say. But at the same time, maybe I should keep it short because I get very depressed when we talk about this match right here. But, yeah, like I was saying, guys, I just wish in retrospect, they would have saved the RVD title match for WrestleMania or for a bigger show. I just think having Van Dam in this spot, this is definitely filler. You knew there's no way in hell after Bischoff gave Triple H the championship that Triple H was going to lose at the first pay-per-view. I mean, he had lost the championship to Hogan at Backlash, his first pay-per-view after WrestleMania where he won the Undisputed Championship. There's just no way in hell he was going to lose it again. So I think most people kind of knew that. I think most people felt it. And for whatever reason, this environment just didn't really cater to Rob Van Dam. I know Van Dam actually did move to the West Coast, I believe, but it just didn't have, that ECW or, the feel that he had in his hometown at Vengeance back in Michigan. It just didn't feel like that. This is one of the most lackluster reactions I've ever heard for RVD. So, looking back in retrospect, I understand you want to get a good buy rate. And by the way, Unforgiven, the selling point for this pay-per-view was they wanted to stack the card with 2 championship matches. This is the first time they had done it, since the brand extension. So that was kind of like the selling point of the pay-per-view and the marketing behind it. But so I would just say this, in retrospect, I would have been cool if you had Triple H versus Bubba Ray Dudley. They already had been feuding. They had a match on Raw the same night Triple H was awarded the championship, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe it was the week after that. Or maybe you do Triple H and Kane, have the Katie Vick angle, kind of, get that jump started and do a rematch at No Mercy, have RVD in the Un-American match. I would have preferred that. And like I was saying, guys, maybe if there's one of the other guys from the Un-Americans you could have plugged in that spot, I think that would have been cool. Maybe even doing like a 4-way, maybe do Jericho, Flair, RVD, Triple H. I would have been cool with that. You could still kind of, tell the story of, Flair uniting with Triple H if you do that. But yeah, I mean, aside from that, I enjoyed the build-up. At the time, I was like, all right, cool. We're getting Triple H versus Rob Van Dam. RVD is going for the championship. Like, I thought it was great. I wasn't thinking long-term. I wasn't thinking about the long-term side effects of doing it now. So I was just happy that they were doing it as a huge RVD fan. I mean, the night when Van Dam won the #1 contendership, I thought the reaction for him was great. They did a tag match where Van Dam hit the Van Daminator on the new championship and pinned Triple H. The reaction for that was cool. And I liked the promos between RVD and Triple H. I thought they were good stuff. They were kind of funny, but they had like real life tension to them. RVD was like, your talent just amazes me, man. You could spit a lot of water. I'm Mr. Muscle and Fitness. I'm, Mr. Exercise. I can spit a lot of water. Grr. It was kind of funny. He actually did spit out the water during the match, and that was actually a funny part of the match. And then Triple H had the, cut the promo on Rob that he just didn't have any passion, didn't have any desire, and that type of thing. But I enjoyed the build up there. I thought there was actually legit, real tension between them. I mean, they don't have a lot in common. I mean, the only thing they really have in common is that they're both wrestlers and they both have like long hair. I mean, that's really it. But that's where it stops. I mean, Triple H is totally different. This is a guy that, he wanted to take over the industry, and he did. And I'm glad. I'm glad that Triple H has creative control. I think the timing is perfect. I think he's the right guy for the job. Rob Van Dam, I wouldn't say that Van Dam lacks passion, but it's a little bit different. I think Van Dam is passionate about what he's good at. I think he's passionate about, wrestling within, the ECW environment or wrestling the way he wants to. But, is RVD gonna, watch every single Raw and SmackDown? And is he gonna, politic to be the champion of the WWE and follow the WWE guidelines and kind of adapt and adjust? I mean, that's not what makes RVD great. What makes RVD great is he loved doing it his own way. So it's just a little bit of a mix of styles, and I'm a little bit, I'm a little bit disappointed with the ratings for this match. I mean, nobody hated the outcome of this thing more than me. I'll definitely say that. And some people kind of use this as, the start of Triple H just burying people. Like, oh, he got buried here. There's no way he could come back from it. But the ratings, though, man, 2.5 stars, 2 stars, 2.25. Was it really that bad? Or is it just me? Is it just me overrating it because of who's involved? Because it's RVD going for the title up against Triple H coming off a classic. Maybe it's true. Maybe I have overrated it. I've always given this thing maybe 3.5 at the minimum. But I could understand some of the low ratings. But let me know. Let me know who's more accurate. Is it more 3.5 or is it more 2? I just like to know looking back on it. But What I think the problem was here, like I was saying, guys, like this was like 6 p.m. Pacific time, so it didn't have like that primetime feel. For whatever reason, the fans really aren't into RVD. There's like a lot of Triple H chants for whatever reason. I mean, there is. I just think at the time, like, Triple H's heel character hadn't caught on yet. Maybe people weren't watching the show or whatever. It's just, you still had a long ways to go before Triple H was going to get that full legit evolution heat. So I think that had a little bit to do with it. In terms of the match, it definitely felt like more of Triple H trying to be old school NWA. It almost felt like he was trying to, throw it back to Harley Race and Flair with his style here, because, the championship, I mean, even though Jarrett was using the NWA title in TNA at the time, it was the WCW title, and the lineage still basically traces back to the NWA days. So you can make an argument that both titles actually have the NWA legacy to them. So I get what Triple H was trying to do. He was trying to have, more of a slow paced match, trying to apply the headlock, the Harley Race high knee. It definitely felt like it wasn't really catering to the ECW RVD style. I mean, it really wasn't. I mean, really the only high spot that Van Dam did here, he went for the Tope Con Hilo, whatever you want to call it, Somerset flip over the top rope, and Triple H totally got out of the way, and Van Dam's back just hits the mat. That looked like a nasty bump. That looked like it really hurt. But other than that, I mean, you had your typical. I mean, really, what this was the start of the whole Triple H, evolution finishes with Flair coming down, being the dirtiest player in the game. You saw the ref bump. Van Dam actually does hit the frog splash after the ref bump. I really thought RVD's comeback was not bad here. The frog splash got a good reaction, but then all of a sudden you saw Triple H hit a low blow. And then you see Triple H take out the sledgehammer. Van Dam actually does the Van Daminator to the sledgehammer. I thought that was cool. That wasn't bad at the time. Like, I didn't expect Flair to turn. I really didn't. I didn't see it coming. So at the time, a lot of the stuff I was really buying into. I think a lot of people have to put themselves back in this spot at the time. I think it's easy to trash the match now because of what happened in the aftermath and everything like that. But at the time, I found it pretty engaging. And then after the sledgehammer shot, Flair actually comes down, steals the sledgehammer, acts like he's going to attack Triple H, and then he hits Van Dam with the sledgehammer in the ribs. Triple H hits the pedigree, and that's pretty much game. And Flair actually gives the belt to Triple H and looks at him and says, "You're the man, buddy. You're the man." He says it 2 times in a row, and then that's pretty much it for RVD. He never really recovered from this. Like, I always thought, he would find a way. I mean, Triple H and Van Dam had a couple of matches after this, but it was always a situation where it was going to help the other guy out, like Shawn Michaels being the referee to set up their match, or I think they had a match right before Kane unmasked, but very little. And, both guys really didn't get along. And, there were reports at house shows that Van Dam would, usually injure Triple H. And, from what I remember, it was reported that both guys didn't really see eye to eye. And things totally changed when Triple H took on, more of an authority role with the company, and he decided to bring RVD back for Money in the Bank, and it was like a totally different relationship. But it was cool, though. I don't think if you're going to blame somebody here, you blame RVD. I think if he really pushed for it, he could have been champion. I think both guys did deserve, to be champion on Raw. If you were to tell me, Triple H is going to be champion, he's going to start the stable with Evolution and Flair, Randy Orton, and you're going to have another champion on SmackDown, I would say, yeah, I could see it happening. He's definitely deserving of that. But I could see the other way, too. I could see RVD at the time, definitely being deserving of a lengthy reign during the brand extension. But it's just a competitive time. A lot of people thought the answer would be to have Van Dam go to SmackDown. And once he did go to SmackDown, it didn't really help. It really didn't solve any problems. So I don't know. I think, what Van Dam was passionate about was bringing back ECW and just being allowed to have that flexibility and that style in ECW. And that's when he got his moment. So, It is what it is, but I probably spent a little bit too long on it. But yeah, I still think it's a solid match. I could take my personal feelings out of the equation and just say it was solid. Disappointing, yeah, but it wasn't a bad match. I would definitely say the match with Jericho at WrestleMania. I would actually put this above the RVD match. I think that's an underrated match. I think people kind of crap on the Jericho match because of what it had to follow, but this is still better than a lot of the disappointment Triple H matches that you got in 2002. I would actually say it's better than the Angle match from No Way Out, better than the Undertaker match from King of the Ring. Yeah, definitely better than the Hogan match from Backlash. So I still don't think it's bad, but I could see definitely being disappointing because of the crowd reaction for Van Dam and just the mixing of the styles. But let's just move on. I'll move on when I want to move on. That's Reservoir Dogs right there. All right, so next up we got Molly Holly taking on Trish Stratus for the Women's Championship. I thought this was good. This was short and sweet. This didn't have the story that Trish and Molly had earlier in the year when it was about Molly's fat ass and all that stuff. This was just about putting the title on Trish. But it was good, man. Molly kicked out of the chick kick. She kicked out of the bulldog. And, they just had a fast-paced match. And you could definitely see Trish was just, getting better. And this was definitely her most emotional championship victory. She actually started crying after she won the belt when she was being interviewed by Coach. She was just like, I love this. I love each and every one. I love competing. And it was just a good moment. Jerry Lawler even said, she started out as being a great-looking woman. And now she's become a great wrestler. So just a good moment for Trish. Really a big fan of Trish. It's pretty well documented if you've been following this channel. So, and then we'll move on to, what was after this? Okay. So next up, you got the match of the night. In my opinion, one of the best series of matches in WWE history. We got Chris Benoit taking on Kurt Angle at Unforgiven. They only get about 14 minutes, but they probably make the best out of 14 minutes more than anybody in the history of the company. This is a classic match right here. I would definitely say, man, it's tough to even talk about this because it's so good. But yeah, Benoit versus Angle. It's definitely I would say it's the second best match they've ever had. I mean, I'm still going to put the Royal Rumble above it. The Rumble just takes you on an adventure. It's just such a great ride. It's much more than just, I would definitely say the Unforgiven match, what it really specializes in is just competition and the submission work. But I feel like at the Rumble, it's more of a sports entertainment ride where it just gives you the near falls, the high spots. It's more of an adventure. It's more emotional, I think, as well because of the aftermath with the standing ovation. But yeah, this was good stuff. One of Meltzer's criticisms here was that Benoit and Angle didn't cut any promos in the ring. And maybe it kind of ties into that Paul Heyman philosophy where you hide the negatives and accentuate the positives. And maybe that was definitely Heyman's doing. If you look at some of the best moments of tension in the feud, the video package makes it look like it was comedy and just basically over both guys getting the stink face. And Benoit's like, nobody laughs at me. Nobody humiliates me. So it was basically about, Rikishi hit the stink face on both guys, and then they would just kind of make fun of each other. So, but the bottom line is, if you were watching SmackDown at the time, there were some really good heated segments between Benoit and Angle. The one with Eddie Guerrero was funny as hell. When they first got there, when Benoit and Eddie first defected from SmackDown, Eddie goes like to Angle, he's like, you see, this is Chris Benoit. He's the master of submission. And then all of a sudden it was like, Angle would be like, wait a second. I'm the master of submission. And then anytime Benoit would brag about being a better technical wrestler, a better submission wrestler, it would always bother Angle. Angle would just say, that's a load of crock. Like, I'm the best technical wrestler. So I think having Benoit and Angle on the same show was great for both of them, especially great for Angle. I think it gave him that competitive outlet that he needed because I think it's important. I think it's really important to have that competitive valor, or that person that brings the best out of you from a competition standpoint. Because when you don't have it, I think you start to get depressed. Especially during the pandemic, like when I wasn't getting any competitive outlet, you would start to think about old girlfriends and old coaches. Then you just start to get very negative. And I know why it happened is because you don't have that competitive outlet. But with these guys, man, it was just on another level. The competition between them, it was just really good stuff. I mean, at what Angle, even though what happened with Benoit happened, he's still just very complimentary of the matches that they had together. Just Chris, he just said Chris Benoit, like nobody was able to match his intensity. If anything, Angle had to match his intensity. And it's almost like, looking back on it, it's just like, maybe that wasn't healthy. Like when you're that competitive, when you're that intense, day in and day out, maybe you could argue that it can't be healthy. But that's what made Benoit great. Like, he was just a machine. He was a Wolverine. And so, yeah, I think I talked about enough of the build-up here. Yeah, the match is incredible. Taz on commentary, he gave you some really good insight about, Benoit's diet and the conditioning. And both guys are just in incredible shape. They even did some chain wrestling here. Not as over the top as they did it at WrestleMania 17 with the amateur wrestling and all that stuff, but you could definitely see some really good technical wrestling here. The gut wrenches, just really, really good stuff. And then what really stands out here is you could definitely tell it's a better matchup than it was in 2001. I think two things. You could definitely recognize that Angle just a lot more comfortable. He's just coming across better than he was in 2001. When maybe you could argue he was still a little bit green. And then at the same time, I think Benoit taking the break, it kind of recharged his batteries. You could definitely tell he put a lot of emphasis on cardio and just getting a little bit leaner. And he was just a little bit more rejuvenated. And I just think it made for better matches. The German sequence is just beautiful. I mean, they got a standing ovation after it. But it's more than just Germans, though. I know some guys have said in the past that Benoit and Angle overused the Germans, but it's other things too. The submission work. The counters to the Angle slam. Benoit actually countered the Angle slam into a release German avalanche suplex where Angle actually rotated. Angle actually landed on his stomach this time. The first time they did it, Angle landed on his head in the three-way with Undertaker, but he was able to do it this time. I mean, the running belly to belly, once again, it came off awesome here. But I think what really makes the Unforgiven match stand out is just the submission work. And this is a heel versus heel match. This is a heel versus heel match where, both heels were treated like baby faces. Benoit got a huge babyface pop when he did the headbutt and when he did the cutthroat sign for the headbutt. That was a huge response there. And then when Angle actually reversed the crossface into an ankle lock, the crowd exploded. Taz was even like, man, the fans are pulling for Angle. I would definitely say Angle was definitely the favorite, but both guys had a lot of support here. And, just the innovation, what really stands out here, Benoit gets to the ropes after the ankle lock. Then all of a sudden, from out of nowhere, Angle just locks in a crossface. And then as he has the crossface locked on, he uses his foot to push away the rope. I think this is the first time you've ever seen it. And I know a lot of times guys have tried to do this again, but I think the first time ever, someone had a crossface locked in and he used a rope to avoid the rope break. I thought it was great stuff. But somehow, some way, Benoit reversed it into a pin and he got his foot on the rope. Not a great finish, not a very memorable finish. But yeah, I thought the match was dope, man. I mean, I wish they could have gotten a little bit more time. In some ways, I prefer the WrestleMania 17 match, but I can't deny the submission stuff at the end was a little bit more engaging. And for whatever reason, I just feel like the high spots, the Germans, everything just looked a lot better than they did in 2001. So yeah, great match. I could talk about Angle versus Benoit all day long, but all right, next thing on the pay-per-view was the hot lesbian action segment. So because 3-minute warning won the match for Eric Bischoff and Raw, Stephanie McMahon had to perform hot lesbian action. So they actually bring out the Miller Lite Catfight girls. at the time, I don't think they had shot the commercial yet, but I definitely think it's the same girls. Definitely the brunette there is definitely the same girl. The brunette is hot as hell. She's one of the hottest girls I've ever seen. So I don't know what happened to her, but this whole thing is just a tease. So when Steph comes out, Bischoff is like, no. I found you the ugliest, fattest, most disgusting lesbian that I could find. And it's like Rikishi dressed up as like a drag queen, and they swerve Bischoff, and Bischoff takes a stink face and gets humiliated by Rikishi. That's how this segment pretty much ends. Well, yeah, I mean, hot lesbian action. I wish I could go into a rant, not a rant, but a story about lesbians, and do you have to be hot to be a lesbian, or for lesbian sex to sell? I don't really know, but I guess at the time it was kind of a thing, to find lesbians that were actually hot, because I think kind of the myth is that most girls become lesbians because they're really not that hot. But I don't know the whole story there. But yeah, let's just move on. Let's just move on to the main event. The main event we have for the WWE Championship, we got Undertaker challenging the next big thing. The next big thing has arrived. Brock Lesnar with Paul Heyman for the WWE Championship. And it's funny, man. This really does make SmackDown feel like the bigger brand at the time. They actually do main event. They had the more... I don't know. I really think you could have had Triple H and RVD main event the show. It's funny because I think the reaction for RVD and Triple H would have been better had they gotten the main event. But you can't argue with this. I mean, Brock and Taker, it was just a big matchup. The crowd was incredible here. Let me talk about the video package. If you have not seen the video package yet, definitely check it out. I thought it was awesome stuff. A lot to say about it because, they show the evolution of Taker through the years, and then they show Brock becoming a man, where they show they have amateur wrestling footage of Brock from like 94, 95, and 96. And each year you see him getting bigger and stronger. And then you see him morph into the next big thing where he looks like fucking Drago on steroids. So, I mean, Brock looked great here, man. This is the biggest I've ever seen Brock. I mean, he looked jacked. I thought he made for a great heel. I would have loved to see Brock ride this wave as a heel for as long as possible, looking back on it. But yeah, man, video package was great. They actually, give Paul Heyman credit. I believe he actually wrote this or had a lot to do with the creative here. And it definitely worked. It paid off. It got people emotionally invested. He mentioned Undertaker's wife at the time, Sarah, being pregnant. And there's this great segment where they take Taker out with the chair, and then Brock intimidates Sarah and he says, life is a bitch, and kind of, pump fakes her with like he's gonna clothesline her, but he doesn't. And then they edit to Taker saying, Brock, you said life is a bitch. Well, I'm here to tell you, punk, payback's a bitch. And then they have this great song in the package. I think his name is Gavin Rosenthal or Gavin Rosendale. He's actually the lead singer from Bush, and he did this song on the Triple X soundtrack. This is a great song. I would have had this on my pay-per-view themes list, but it wasn't available because it was on the Triple X soundtrack. I don't know if this ever got an Apple Music release. It's just hard to find the actual song. But yeah, it's a great song. I thought the video package was incredible. If you haven't seen it yet, I think this is, one of the best, video packages that they've ever done. And the video package is so good that after it's over, you could tell it's resonating in the air with the crowd. It actually is bringing the crowd to life. The same way Shawn and Triple H's video package did at SummerSlam. Same feeling here. And this is the first time Taker ever came down with the "You're Gonna Pay" theme, where they actually give him lyrics for that song. I get why they did it. The lyrics actually gave it more of a babyface feel. And when you listen to that Taker instrumental without the lyrics, it kind of sounds exactly like the Bischoff theme. That's kind of the side effect if you're asking the same guy to create the same themes. I think it was Jim Johnston that did these themes at the time. But yeah, Brock and Undertaker, I thought this was good, man. They gave you a great main event. I love everything about this match except the finish. I just think they could have been a little bit more creative on the finish, but I thought it was intense. This is definitely the best Taker had looked all year. He definitely brought it, and it just showed you a lot of these matches that Taker got shitted on, in 2002, whether it be Rock, Austin, Hogan, or the Triple H disaster at King of the Ring. It's clear now, looking back on it, that Taker was not the weak link. But Taker did step up his conditioning here. He definitely, for whatever reason, I think Taker is like, along with Paul Heyman, along with Vince, like one of the biggest supporters for Brock. And I think it was definitely evident when he decided Brock was going to end the streak. But, it almost felt like Taker was in a rush to put over Brock because he had that much respect for him and saw that much star power in him. But yeah, I thought this had great tension. This had, great intensity, a great crowd. They didn't really go overkill with near falls. They just did a lot of teasing, but like everything got a great reaction. Taker's fluidity was definitely, his conditioning and just everything was just, a step up from where it was earlier on in 2002. And, there was even some stuff that you wouldn't expect to be a near fall, like Brock using the spine buster. That was like one of the best near falls all night. So the referee is actually Brian Hebner, and Brian Hebner actually took a couple of ref bumps here, and it culminated in Taker actually taking kind of intercepting the chair and giving Brock this nasty looking chair shot. This is almost similar to the Jeff Hardy chair shot, or the chair shot the Hardys gave to Brock, where you could see the indentations of the chair. It was nasty. I mean, you got to think, thank God Brock took a break, because, maybe he would have ended up with CTE if he didn't, because he took some of the most vicious chair shots I've ever seen. So, yeah, you could, and Taker took a nasty looking belt shot behind the referee's back too. So you saw a little bit of blood, not overwhelming amount of blood, but God, the finish though, and it kind of makes sense because Brian Hebner had gotten, knocked down twice already. So there's actually a really nice sequence of Brock and Taker countering the last ride in the F5. And it just kind of ends up with both guys just kind of brawling by the turnbuckle. And then all of a sudden, Brian Hebner's trying to break it up. And then Brock just takes him and grabs him by the neck. And then he falls down. And then all of a sudden, the ref calls for a DQ. This is the most heated I've ever seen a crowd for a DQ finish. I mean, they were pissed. I mean, the crowd was definitely pissed. But hey, I mean, they were emotionally engaged and definitely made you want to see a rematch. It's funny. They started bringing out all these referees, and Michael Cole had a great line. He's like, if you want to break up this fight, you got to send out the National Guard. Then all of a sudden, Taker just starts on giving Brock these low blows with his boot, just kicking him in the nuts. And all of a sudden, they just start brawling to the back, and Taker just throws him through the Unforgiven set design, and it's almost like Brock had to run through it just to make a break. So Taker kind of just escorts him through the Unforgiven sign and throws him through it. So yeah, I mean, very reminiscent to the Ground Zero match between Taker and Shawn, where they do the no finish at September, and then they have the Hell in a Cell in October. But in a lot of ways, I think there's a lot more positives here than the Ground Zero match. I really think better environment, better atmosphere, a little bit more intense. I mean, I think both finishes are a little crappy, but I think maybe Shawn and Taker, there was a little bit more bad blood there because of what happened at SummerSlam. So, but yeah, I think both matches actually had great stories. So, yeah, it's a great main event. Some people might be a little bit let down by the rating of the main event, but I can't give it a great rating. I just think that's probably one of the lamest DQs I've ever seen. And it's funny, like when Brian Hebner called for the DQ, one guy at the pay-per-view party said, "It's because he's a fucking Hebner." And I was just like, oh, I guess that is Brian Hebner. So it just showed you how much heat Earl Hebner had within some WWE fans. But that's pretty much it, guys. That's Unforgiven. I think this is a fun show. I think it's a good show. It's got it's got great star power. I mean, you got Jericho, Flair, Eddie, and Edge, Triple H, RVD, Benoit and Angle, Trish winning the title. The first ever Brock and Taker match, where they're still pretty young at the time. I mean, it's 25-year-old Brock. I'm going to say maybe it's being generous, 37, 38-year-old Undertaker. So yeah, the earliest version of that. So that's pretty much it, guys. That's Unforgiven 2002. I would definitely say top 5 pay-per-view of '02, and I'm out. All right.